Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the world. My name is Zach Jones. Welcome back to my channel, but if you're new to my channel, then welcome. A fair few of you know that I have been doing PowerPoint presentations recently, but because while I usually do them about birds or animals of other continents, I've decided at this time to do just one group of animals, wolves. Wolves are the largest wild members of the dog family, and they are, to me, some of the most incredible animals, but also probably my third favourite animal. I've chosen 5 wolves of the world, and I'm going to start with the voice of the wilderness and also one of the most incredible animals of them all. It is the grey wolf. Grey wolves are the largest members of the dog family, and when I say the largest, I mean a fully grown male can grow to be bigger than an Alsatian and weigh about 137 pounds, and they have formidable teeth. And of course, when I said about them being bigger than a German Shepherd or an Alsatian, they can also have a bite force much more powerful than one. Of course, wolves have always been portrayed in human myths and folklores as the bad guys, and in many stories, wolves play the villains, and they're often portrayed as sly, cunning, and murderous killers. And of course, there's also the horror stories of werewolves. And this has caused many people across the world to fear and dislike wolves, but while they often play the role as the villain, they are not actually that dangerous. In fact, they're curious and they're quite often playful and inquisitive. But years of persecution have made wolves avoid humans, but I'll get to that bit later. Grey wolves grey wolves are found in much of the northern hemisphere. In fact, they're probably one of the most widespread land carnivores in the world. And of course, what's most incredible about grey wolves is that they can live in packs. They live in packs of usually about 20 to 25 individuals, and it isn't just a family unit, it's also how they work together to bring down large prey. And of course, how it goes is there's usually only 2 dominant wolves, and that's the male and the female, and they're the alpha pair, and a lot of the wolves in their pack are their offspring from previous seasons. And of course, when I said about wolves living in packs, that's partly down to the fact that they can also take on prey that weighs 5 times more than they do, and that can be, in Europe it could be red deer, but in North America it could be elk, moose, or even bison, which are probably the biggest land animals wolves regularly take down. Of course, another thing about wolves that I've always found the most fascinating is their incredible sense of smell. In fact, whenever you're up close to wolves, they're always being drawn by their sense of smell, and that's how they process the world around them. In fact, they have probably a sense of smell that's 8,000 times more powerful than ours. And another thing about their sense of smell is when they're out hunting for prey, because when their prey moves around, quite often dead skin and hair cells fall off them and land on the floor, or quite often their footprints leave a scent. And of course, wolves then take long, deep sniffs to work out as much information about their prey. In fact, from that they can tell if the animal is old, weak, injured, or even sick, and that helps them determine whether they can take it down. Because when wolves hunt together, how they do it is, like in North America, they've been seen hunting elk, which are basically the North American version of the red deer in Europe. And especially in the winter, because during the winter, elk have to break down through the snow in order to get at the grass and to feed on the conifer trees, a lot of which don't have an awful lot of nutrition in them. So as the winter goes on, the elk are just getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and that makes them easy pickings for wolves. How they do it is the lightest and fastest wolves start a chase, while others circle around, waiting for when their prey, waiting for when the others either tire or to cut off their prey's escape routes. The wolves on the side are quite often called flankers, and their job is to block off any escape routes. And of course, what wolves do is they look for an animal that's young, old, weak, injured or sick, and separate it from the herd. And when wolves are chasing prey, because they have enormous hearts and lungs, and they can travel as fast as an Olympic sprinter, but it's their stamina and endurance that helps them keep up with their prey, because it means they can run longer times than their prey. And when they've got their prey alone and vulnerable, the whole pack will zone in, and once their prey is exhausted, the whole pack pile in. And while it can be a gruesome end for an elk like here, it ultimately assures that the rest of the herd remains strong. But there is actually one remote corner of the planet in northern Canada where the wolves are there still hunt bison, as they have done for thousands of years. In fact, the wolves in northern Canada are the largest and most powerful in the world, and they regularly take down bison, which are the largest land animals in North America. As you can see here, bison is enormous. They're big, they're bulky, they've got enormous horns, so they are dangerous. But the wolves there in northern Canada have been hunting bison for hundreds or if not thousands of years. Of course, quite often what the wolves do when they're hunting prey that big is they usually target a yearling, which is a youngster, or an animal that's old, weak or sick, and quite often when they bite, wolves' canine teeth can leave a 6-inch gash around the leg, and quite often they just have to pull back and then wait for the animal to succumb to the wound. And of course, when the feeding starts, there's quite often a lot of fighting going on, because you get to see who's in charge, because the alpha male, he always has to assert himself on the kill, and he always gets the best bits of meat, and he always has to make sure that everyone else in the pack knows he's the boss. Because wolves were actually one of the most widespread land predators in the world. In fact, they were found across all of the northern hemisphere. But, unfortunately, when human settlers arrived in their territories and cut down a lot of the forests they relied on to make way for farms and livestock, conflict began. As wolves, quite often, when their natural prey was depleted by farmers, they often went to kill livestock, and quite often they did attack people. And then, of course, people began killing wolves. In Britain, they were hunted to extinction, and they were wiped out in large parts of Europe. But worst of all, in North America, more than 1 million wolves were shot, poisoned, and trapped. And by the middle of the last century, they'd been exterminated from much of the United States and pushed into the wilds of Canada. And they were nearly on the brink of extinction, but attitudes have changed slightly. Because in the 1970s, grey wolves were classed as an endangered species, and efforts were made to preserve them In fact, in the 1990s, wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park, which is the oldest national park in the world, and they were brought back to keep down populations of elk and moose because they were overgrazing, and the wolves helped bring the ecosystem of Yellowstone back into balance. And they've been reintroduced in much of the United States, a lot of them from Canada, and slowly grey wolves have been making a comeback in North America and much of Europe. In fact, in Europe, probably the best place to see grey wolves is in the Carpathian Mountains in Romania, because that's home to Europe's largest population of grey wolves. And while there have been talks about reintroducing wolves to Britain, while I do think that they should be brought back to the Caledonian Forest in Scotland, because the deer population there has been getting well out of hand, and of course we are wasting thousands of pounds each year on deer culls that don't even work. While I do think that we should bring wolves back to Scotland, that is a very debatable question for a lot of people, and because that's for another day. And of course, because of the persecution grey wolves have suffered over the last few decades, they are some of the hardest animals in the world to find and film. I mean, they're no longer endangered animals. There are thousands of them in North America and Europe, but people rarely see them as they're very shy, they're very elusive, their territories can span hundreds of square miles, and they're mostly nocturnal, which means they're active at night. And also, with their incredible sense of smell, if they can pick up your scent from a mile away, they will avoid you. Another thing that I've always liked about wolves is how they bring themselves together, particularly before a hunt. And how they do that is by using a howl. And of course, a strong howl from a wolf can be heard from over 6 miles away. It often is used as a way to rally the pack together, or it can be used as a message to rival packs to keep you in their distance. It's basically the wolf version of sending a text or an email. But yeah, I've never really seen these wolves before. I've never seen grey wolves in the wild or captivity before, but I do hope that one day I will be able to go and see wolves in the wild. But even if I can, I'll go see them. It's a very, very slim chance I might see them, because as I said, they're very, very hard to find. Of course, here is much of their range in the world. As you can see, they are some of the most widespread large predators in the northern hemisphere. Now, the next wolf I'm going to show you is probably the most threatened member of the dog family. It is the Ethiopian or Abyssinian wolf. This particular species of wolf is found in Ethiopia in East Africa, where it is endemic, which means it's found there and nowhere else on Earth. And it's a very different animal to its grey wolf cousin. I mean, for one thing, the muzzle is a lot longer and thinner, so it can get into cracks and crevices. Its teeth are smaller and more spread out than they are on a grey wolf. But what is probably the biggest difference between them and grey wolves is their hunting. Because although Ethiopian wolves live in packs, they don't hunt together, because where they live in places like the Bale Mountains, there's nothing up there like an elk or a moose or a bison that needs to be brought down by the whole pack working together. So they hunt on their own, and a lot of what they feed on is rodents like mole rats. And how they hunt is they just have to creep up on their prey with You're using stealth and lightning quick reactions, and they can snatch an unwary rodent from its burrow. Very different hunting style to the pack hunting grey wolf. But